Jinhsi has some insane damage with her ultimate and her Forte Circuit, which we'll talk everything about. So let's get this started. And if you liked the video, make sure to subscribe and join the Discord because we have an amazing community that would love to answer any of your Jinhsi questions, even for future characters such as Chun-Li. Jinhsi is a 5-star rarity character from the Spectral element and uses the Broad Blade type weapon. Let's go on with her active skills. She does 4 consecutive strikes for her basic attack. She also does a charged attack at the cost of stamina and deals spectral damage, and also does a mid-air attack, which she does a plunging attack while mid-air at the cost of stamina. And finally, she does have a dodge counter as well, where she uses a basic attack after the successful dodge to counteract, and all 4 of these does do spectral damage. Alright, let's move on to the resonance skill, which is called the Trailing Lights of Eons, where 3 things can happen. The first is she simply uses her ability and she dashes forward and performs consecutive strikes that inflict spectral damage, or you can go into the Overflowing Radiance, which after she uses 4 basic attacks, or while you're not in Incarnation, you can use her intro skill as well, which is going to give an alternative resonance skill after 5 seconds. You can use the resonance skill, Overflowing Radiance, and then it's going to inflict spectral damage, but it's also going to send Jinhsi into Incarnation mode, which is going to be in her Forte Circuit. And finally, we have her ultimate called the Purge of Light, which does an absolutely insane amount of damage, which at level 1 does almost 850% extra skill damage, but you can go all the way up to level 10, which can give you almost double that amount of damage. So she is definitely a powerhouse of a DPS. Alright, let's move on to her Forte Circuit, Luminosynthesis. So once you do your basic attacks, you go into the Incarnation form, which is actually going to have alternative basic attacks. So you'll have a alternative dodge, alternative attack, heavy attack, mid-air attack, you name it. You'll also have an alternate resonance skill attack. So once you do your basic attacks, you want to use your resonance skill called the Illuminous Epiphany, and once you do that, you can actually do even more damage by consuming 50 incandescence, which is the maximum amount that you can hold in your Forte Circuit. And also, you know that you're going to be in Incarnation mode if there is a dragon symbol in the Forte Circuit bar, or when she has her horns out. Jinhsi is also going to be going in unison, so it's going to allow her to do a different outro skill. However, it's also going to make it so that she will only use the unison instead of using the concerto energy when her concerto energy is full. So we talk about incandescence, but how do we actually get that? Well, you can get 1 incandescence every single time a resonator in the party inflicts attribute type damage, which is electro damage, spectral damage, you name it, but it has to come from another teammate, such as Yinlin, Reina, Mortifi, and many more. Additionally, Jinhsi gains 2 incandescence when the resonators in the party damage the enemy with coordinated attacks. This effect can only be triggered every 3 seconds for the same attribute type. Alright, let's move on to her inherent skills. So for the inherent skills, she has the Radiant Surge, which she does an additional 20% spectral damage bonus. This only applies to her, by the way. And the other inherent skill is called the Converged Flash, which the damage multiplier of the intro skill is going to increase by a further 50%. Alright, let's move on to the intro and outro skill. So for the intro skill, she's simply going to be attacking the target and dealing spectral damage. However, for the outro skill, called the Temporal Bender, she's going to be summoning Shuei, and now she's actually going to be gaining incandescence. So for every 1 time, every 1 second, for 20 seconds, she's going to be able to build that up. For the skill priority, you definitely want to go for the Forte Circuit first. Once you level up the Forte Circuit, you want to move on to her Resonance Liberation. Afterwards, you can simply go on to the Resonance skill, and then finally you can either level the basic attack or the intro skill. Alright, let's move on to the weapons. So I'm going to give you 3 different options. There's going to be the 5 stars, the 4 stars, and the 3 stars. So for the 5 stars, I would of course recommend her Aegis of Harvest, which is definitely the best in slot. However, if you don't go for a weapon, you can always go for the Union level 45 free weapon, which you can pick up once you hit that, and you can get the Lustrous Razor. However, if you already used that weapon for another character or a different weapon type, then you can also get the 4-star weapons. For the 4-star weapons, I would recommend the Helios Cleaver or the Autumn Trace, which you can get from the Battle Pass. And finally, for the 3-star weapons, you can simply go for anything that has attack percentage, since that's going to be helping Jinhsi out the most. Moving on to the echoes, the cost for echoes that I would recommend is either the Morning Ace, which are good for free-to-play players or players that haven't gone to the new map yet, or Jue for the people that have already experienced everything, including the new 1.1 map called Mount Firmament. Now for both echoes, I would recommend the crit rate main stat if you're going for a free-to-play friendly build. However, if you get a weapon, then I would recommend the crit damage, which gives you an additional 44% as the main stat. For the cost 3 echoes, it has been found that the 30% spectral damage plus the 30% attack is actually going to do better as opposed to a simple double 30% spectral damage, which actually is pretty good news because it's going to make a lot of players very happy about farming the echoes, since you don't have to specifically look for double spectral damage. And finally, the cost one, you want to go for attack percentages as opposed to HP because it's going to help you do more damage. And for the substats, you want to prioritize energy regen first. Once you get to 30% additional, then you want to go to crit rate or crit damage. Once you get as much crit or crit damage, you want to go for the attack percentage, then the resonance skill damage, then the attack, and then finally the resonance liberation damage bonus. Everything else doesn't really help her or is almost useless. So there you go. Let's move on to her team composition. So for the sub DPS, Yanlin, Morphe, or even Yan Wu can provide a lot of damage and support for Jinhsi. So for Yanlin, she can do AoE damage, which is really good for multiple targets. For Morphe and Yan Wu, they're really good for single targets, and Morphe is very good at coordinated attacks with their intro skill, their ultimate, and for Yan Wu, he's also really good for breaking the vibration, which is the bar that you need to break when you're fighting echoes or bosses. For the final option, you can actually go for Tao Chi. Now Tao Chi is also good because she provides a lot of skill, deep, and buff, and she also provides shield to shield. However, she doesn't really increase the incandescence as much, so if you're looking to build her incandescence to use for her Forte Circuit, then I wouldn't suggest her. For the support, I would recommend Reina because she is literally one of the best supports that we have, or the best support. And if you don't have her, completely fine, you can always use Bai Ji as the secondary support. Now let's move on to our rotation. So after you apply support for Reina or for Yanlin, then you move on to Jinhsi. Once you use 4 of her basic attack, then you can move on to her resonance skill. Once you use her resonance skill, she will go into the incarnation mode and you will do 4 alternative basic attacks. Once you use those 4 alternative basic attacks, you can use the alternative resonance skill, and then finally it's going to reset. You can then repeat the rotation for even more damage, and you can use the ultimate at any point because it won't reset the rotation. Every single time, it's going to continue from where it left off. So for instance, if you did 2 basic attacks, used her ultimate, then you will go on to her 3rd and 4th basic attack, which is perfect. Alright, moving on to sequences, I'm going to be recommending to those that are either low spenders or free-to-plays, or to those that are dolphins or whales. So for the free-to-plays and low spenders, I would recommend only going for the sequence 1, as it's going to increase her resonance skill by up to 80%, which is an additional almost 10% increase in her damage, which is amazing. And for the dolphin and whales, I would suggest either going for up to sequence 3, which she's going to be gaining an additional 50% attack from just using her intro, or going all the way up to sequence 6, which is going to boost her attack by an additional almost 50 to 70% for sequence 6. But that's everything adding up. The reason why sequence 6 is so good is because the multiplier of the enhanced resonance skill is not only increased by 45%, but each consumed attack of the incandescence further increased the multiplier by a further 45%. So it's basically going to do a lot of damage. So that's going to be pretty helpful if you decide to go all out with her. Alright, that's it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to like, subscribe, and possibly join the Discord. And if you guys want to as well, I am live on Twitch almost every single day, except for Wednesdays and Thursdays. So if you guys like me to see the game, if you have any questions or anything, we also have another amazing community over at Twitch. So there's that. Alright, see you later. Bye bye.